Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, that is Tim, and this episode should be going live on Halloween Day 2018, the official end of Octoberthon, the third and final Patreon vote movie winner for the month, because we had 3 for October, and of course the vote was for the classic Universal monsters, and the winner was Frankenstein.
Oh, good job.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like there was really a bad option amongst them. It was like Frankenstein, Dracula, Invisible Man, and Wolfman. Like, would you have complained about any of them?
Maybe one of them.
Oh, I wonder if it's the same one that I'd be disappointed with, because there's one that would have disappointed me.
I think so.
You think it's the same one? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to reveal it because we'll eventually do them all. So
Okay. All right, fair. We can say after the show.
yeah, we'll say after the show. It's fine. So yeah, we're going to talk about Frankenstein. Well, I mean, we'll start spoiler free, I guess. But I mean, it's Frankenstein. It's from 1931, right? If you're not familiar with the story of Frankenstein, go read Frankenstein. Okay.
Yeah.
Go do that. And I did actually read the book for this back in high school. I read the book.
Okay. I thought you meant like for this podcast.
No, not for this podcast.
No,
no.
you didn't.
No, I read it back in high school because I did a giant.
I have Frankenstein downloaded on.
Oh, you sped up and slowed down there for a second because of Skype being a dick. What would you say?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. No, it did the same thing for me. I started talking, and then sorry. No, I have Dracula and Frankenstein downloaded on my Kindle, and it's just I know I'll read them one of these days, but
I did a giant project on Dracula. We had to like a big book. We had to pick a. I spoke about Dracula and how it was told through like diary entry and stuff like that. So I went like a sort of narrative structure analysis, but I did a big thing on Dracula. And then the following year, I had to pick another book to do something else on. I was like, I'll do Frankenstein, whatever. I'll keep it in, related thematically. Why not? So Frankenstein. It's a classic. This is the second Universal classic monster movie we've done. It's kind of amazing we've been doing this so long, and we're only on the second one of these. But we did the original Mummy last year, and I guess this year we're doing Frankenstein. I guess we'll just do one a year forever.
Sure.
Maybe that'll be the system. But yeah, so Frankenstein, Mad Doctor, not named Victor Frankenstein, which is I'd forgotten they changed the name to Henry Frankenstein. But annoyingly, there's a character called Victor, which was really just like, what we did, stop it.
it's strange. Yeah,
it's the same with Dracula. How they always seem to swap Lucy and Mina for some reason. It's like, why? Just Mina. Mina's with Jonathan, and Lucy's with the other dude. I can't remember the other one's name. But but hey,
Van Helsing.
No, not Van Helsing. Van Helsing's the older doctor, or vampire hunter, dude, magic. So Frankenstein, bad scientist, try to put body parts together to create a life form, and thus has created the Boris Karloff Frankenstein's monster, and yeah. That's the plot. He wakes up and it's alive, which is the name of Tim's sex tape. And
what is it? My penis? Is that what's alive?
Yeah, I think there's 2 hours of you not being able to get it up, and then eventually the lady in the scene
gets struck by lightning.
Yes, it gets struck by lightning, and the lady starts screaming, "It's alive! Finally, sex can happen." Which, I mean, it's kind of a compliment. It means you must be worth the wait because she stuck around for 2 hours waiting for you to get an erection.
Yeah.
So, you were worth the wait.
Yeah. Wait, for the lady or for the audience that's actually watching this I guess it'd be what, like 2 hours and 1 minute porno? But
that's a good joke, Tim.
Thank you.
That's a good joke. It's a good joke. Bear with us. Skype's acted up with us today, so if we do a little bit of awkward pausing and little fast forward moments,
yeah,
just bear with us. That one wasn't too bad, but it was kind of there a little bit. When Tim gets his proper house soon, maybe his internet will be supercharged and I'll
hopefully
be firing on all cylinders. But yeah, so yeah, I guess we'll just start by saying, do we like or dislike the original Frankenstein? Is this a film that you respect as a classic? Do you see its merit, or do you go back and watch it now and go, okay, I get it. I guess it was good for the time, but don't work much no more.
No, I actually like it quite a bit, and I think we talked before just in general with the Universal monster movies. I think we're both pretty big fans. I'm surprised we didn't do Dracula. I thought we did. I know we did the Mummy, but
Not yet.
yeah,
We'll have a Dracula month at some point. We'll do like 5 versions of Dracula back to back.
Oh, Dractacular.
Dractacular. There you go. We'll do 31 Dracula. We'll do Hammer Dracula. We'll do Dracula Dead and Loving It. Dracula 2000.
Gotta fit Blackula in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, yes. Would it be weird to do that in Black History Month? Would that be a weird thing to do?
I'm not. Yeah, I don't know.
Is that insensitive to do Blackula and Black History Month? I don't know if it is. People, fill us in. I'm not sure. But anyway, so yeah, Frankenstein is very good. I would go as far to say it's my second favorite of the original Universal Monster movies.
Oh, that's tough. It's either 2 or 3 for me. I'm not sure. It's depending on the day.
It's in the ballpark.
Yeah.
You know, it's a simple story. Obviously, it simplifies the story a lot from the book and some other versions of it. Where, typically, I think of Frankenstein. You know, when I think of the story, and it's funny because in the last episode we recorded, you brought up doing Quasimodo and Hunchback of Notre Dame. I wasn't one of the performers in it, but I was in early, maybe I was about age of 9 or 10. We did it was a thing where there was everyone who wasn't a performer was in the choir for what would be like a play of Frankenstein, but the choir, I don't even know what songs were being sung. I think there was actual like Frankenstein songs. I don't know if the school they wrote them, or if it was like an actual thing they took from somewhere. But there were songs, but someone would act out the thing. So that was my first experience really with Frankenstein, and then I read the book and saw the movies and whatnot.
Interesting.
But when I think of Frankenstein, I think of the idea. It's kind of what actually is brought up in Halloween H2O. The idea that eventually he has to face his own monster because he created this thing and it kills so many people that he eventually has to turn around and face it and finally confront his fears. That's kind of what the story of Frankenstein to me is about. This movie kind of changes it a little bit in the sense where, even though there's some dark stuff in here for 1931 movies, because there is, right? There's a very notable scene which is really dark for the time period. It still has a much happier ending than Frankenstein, to what I think of Frankenstein having. So it's very much a different interpretation. It kind of focuses a lot on the build up to the monster becoming alive, and then kind of the tension of like what he might do in the early days. There's not a big long saga of the monster wreaking havoc in his life for forever. But that's not really a complaint so much as just acknowledging the differences in what this is.
Sure.
Versus because go on, you go.
Oh well, like again, I haven't read the book, but like the big difference is like in this one, it's just like a mindless creature, where like the book, it's like he's a very more profound thing that's like questioning its existence, and that's kind of more like what's driving it mad. Where like here, it's just like this kind of like a big bumbling creature who definitely causes havoc, but it's not, a lot of times it's not necessarily all his fault.
Yeah, it comes across a lot more sympathetic, I think, in this one, where it's more like he's a child whose teachers have just turned his back on him because they think he's scary, rather than actually try to teach him right from wrong. So it's like a different vibe in this one. I love how it starts. It starts off feeling kind of macabre because it's at a funeral, and then Frankenstein, his assistant Fritz are just kind of like, right, let's strike, let's get the body, and then they're cutting down like the criminal who's been hung, and they're but obviously the best part is when he sends Fritz to steal a brain from the college. And he drops the normal brain and takes the criminal brain, which I guess is the one thing that implies that the monster shouldn't be sympathetic, that he might actually just be a lunatic.
I like just how like very clearly written it is. It's just like there's normal brain and then there's an abnormal brain.
Yeah, it's very blunt with that. I mean, because there's not really much of a motivation for Frankenstein either. We start the movie and it's already, the ball's rolling. Like he's already doing this. There's no build up, and that these movies are all typically quite short. They're all about 70 minutes long, which is obviously really short by today's standards. But you can see how they've made it a bit more straight to the point with that. But what it does do is very effective. Everything that it chooses to focus on is very effective in doing, which is why I think it works so well. And there is still the general tragedy of him, because to me the movie, it kind of swerves more into the ego. I mean, this is always part of Frankenstein, but the ego of Frankenstein and thinking he can play God, playing God, and then learning the mistakes of doing that. It's the hubris is what puts him all in danger. And then the tragedy of the whole thing, and the havoc that is wreaked when man tries to play God. Notably, of course, the little girl scene, which I think is everyone. It's maybe not the most famous scene from the movie, because I mean I opened this by going, "It's alive, it's alive." That's the famous scene, but I think the most infamous scene is the little girl, where the monster. They're playing with flowers, and it's like they're saying if the float, and he's like, "Oh, we're out of flowers. Let's see if you float," and he throws the girl in, and she drowns. It's actually a really dark scene for this era. These days that'd be nothing, but
yeah,
it's effective. It's really effective for what it does.
I think that scene itself, to me, I don't know. I feel like it's like a little silly, like when you actually watch it. But I feel like what I think is like the more powerful scene is when I think it's the dad is like bringing the body back into the village. Like that's when it that's when it hits home and is like, ooh, like that's where it feels like a lot more darker to me.
Yeah, because it's just the stark reality of no, she's dead. There was no she didn't like, get out at the last second or anything like that. She's dead, and the father's walking through, and that's what inspires the angry mob and hunting down the monster and that. And I think you could argue that there's you could read into this. Maybe this is looking at this from a more modern perspective, but the idea that this thing was created, instead of taking responsibility for it, let's just get pitchforks and torches out and go and hunt it and try and kill it, rather than try to understand it, rather than trying. Because I think Frankenstein, despite the fact that he's a bit of a lunatic and how determined and egotistical he is, he still, up until a point, he wants to try and understand it and learn from it. And everyone else is like, no, this is just too scary. We need to kill it right now. The other professor's like, no, we need to kill this. You're a madman. Kill it right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you look at that and say, oh, is this kind of... I don't know if it was intended this at the time. I don't think it was in the book, because the book is, again, it's more of like a personal monster that is getting revenge for being created. So there's a lot more to read into in the book with that. But in the movie, I don't necessarily think it was meant at the time, but like, is this kind of an analogy for how maybe we treated mental illness, or how we treat anyone who's different? We just go, scary. That's rather than try to understand and trying to educate, just get rid of them, just burn them and do it.
I mean, I feel like there's probably like a lot of things that you can apply to just in general, the idea of trying to destroy something that might be different rather than understanding and and jumping to kind of wild conclusions and stuff. Like there's definitely a lot you can kind of put in place there.
Yeah, and it's made worse because Fritz antagonizes it. Fritz whips it and intentionally pokes fire at him, and it's kind of, it's like, okay, if you treat something badly, it will turn out badly itself. Nurture aspect to it rather than nature, because there is no nature here, not really. There is no nature involved in this. This is purely creation, in an unnatural sense. But I think those themes all really work, and I think it's such an applicable story to think about. Okay, how can you apply this to the themes that you want to apply to it today? And it still kind of works. I think that's why it's so effective, is because on a basic human level, no character in this is squeaky clean, and they're all kind of sympathetic in different ways. Frankenstein wants to understand it until he doesn't. So even though he's kind of mad, you can have sympathize. His family are worried because he's kind of obsessed, and his hubris is getting ahead of him. So you kind of feel sympathy for them because they're kind of right in that. And the monster you feel sympathy for because he's just misunderstood, and he doesn't even get a chance to really develop or become something. He's not taught anything properly. So the whole thing is a tragedy. Like which is why my one complaint about the ending is that Henry Frankenstein lives, and he's we're going to live happily ever after with his wife and have a baby. And it's like, I don't know. This kind of betrays the story to me in a number of ways.
Yeah, and I feel like Frankenstein and in this case Henry Frankenstein, I feel like he should never really be like the good guy. yeah, he always seems more villainous, and I feel like that's how modern interpretations have really, gone more about it. And like, like there's a lot of versions of like Frankenstein as a hero now that I feel like, people maybe sympathize with him more, and it's like, oh yeah, like this guy's a good guy. Like, because you don't really see like many like evil Frankenstein movies now. Like, he's, you see him like as good guys in comics, and like, you know
Even
and
the
then
monster specifically here.
yeah, the, Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
And then like, and then, there's movies which, yeah, admittedly aren't that great, but stuff, like I Frankenstein. And then it's something I actually just watched recently, the Monster Squad. He, like, Frankenstein's like a good guy in that, so I feel like people kind of have come around to liking.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the change in mentality of trying to understand people who are different, as opposed to just like, they're different. Because I think in this, it kind of does try to paint Victor that he's learned his lesson once his wife's attacked, on the wedding night. But I don't know, I never really feel like he's actually understood what he's done and why it was, what his mistake really was. I don't get that arc from him that much in this. It's more just that, it's dangerous, we have to kill it and erase my mistake, rather than him realizing it. And he doesn't. I don't feel like he faces his monster in this in the same way that he just tries to erase it and pretend it never happened almost. And that makes him almost more villainous. So you do kind of root for the monster. Actually, it's funny. I corrected you there because you kept saying Frankenstein, because it sounded like you were talking about the scientist. And obviously that's a common misconception that people forget, that no, Frankenstein means the character, the monster's the monster.
Yeah.
And I actually think a big reason to blame for this is the second movie is Bride of Frankenstein, because that title makes it sound like the Frankenstein is the monster. Because the bride is for the monster.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And yeah, I was like, when I was yeah, that's why I should have clarified. But yeah, I was thinking more of like, like the DC version of Frankenstein or whatever, where it's just called Frankenstein. And I think it's one of those things where, like, I like 10 years ago, when I was probably like a little snobbier, I'd probably be the dude that would correct people, be like, oh no, it's Frankenstein's monster and stuff. But now it's just like, yeah, who cares? Like, it's just easier to, call him that. And also, if you I saw someone say this before, and I was like, oh, I like this this explanation or whatever. But if you look at Henry Frankenstein as like Frankenstein's father, then you could say like, oh, well then, that would also make the creature Frankenstein too, if it's kind of like his son,
Oh, sure, yeah.
He gives birth to him.
I think it's important when you talk about the actual stories, though, because you have to differentiate who you're talking about. If you're talking about the scientist, or if you're talking about the monster himself. So, it's one of these things. But I don't want to say, I think the film's really well put together. I think the scenes where they're trying to bring him to life, and they're putting him up in the tower and the lightning's going off, is very effective and well done. Very simple, because even the reveal of the monster, the first time you see him walking around, it's the way he turns around, and Boris Karloff's performance is very stilted. Of course, it's very not quite robotic, but very wooden in an intentional manner.
Yeah, he really brings like so much to the character, just the way he, it feels like, all right, this is how this jumbled together reanimated corpse would walk. Like, nothing is like perfect. Like, it's not very fluid. Everything's kind of stitched together, so it's like this kind of stiff, jerky movements and stuff. And it did a great job of bringing that to life.
So I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that these movies were always black and white, and for some reason though, I feel like everyone knows he's green. Yeah,
I guess is that maybe did he look like that on like the poster or something? Probably.
Yeah, I guess he did, but yeah, that's true. He probably did. I'm just thinking about it because I can't think of anything else from the black and white days of film where it doesn't matter that it's black and white. Everyone thinks of him as green, no matter what.
Yeah.
I just thought it was interesting. I was thinking about it as I was watching it. I was like, I know he's green, even though this is in black and white, and I guess it maybe just comes from the idea of the body's decomposed a bit. Would it be slightly green? I don't think it would be necessarily, but I think that's
probably not. But yeah,
that's what the thought process was. Maybe when they were making it. Actually, I will criticize one effect though. Obviously, I don't want it's that movie from 1931. I think they do a great job with what they've got with them in the fire, the windmill at the end and the burning. But I do have to critique the dummy because Frankenstein is thrown off the windmill by the monster, and it is the most obvious stupid-looking dummy that falls and hits the windmill. It just looks really bad and goofy. But you know, it's whatever. Like you forgive it, you're fine with it. But
I like the set pieces in this are all like look really good. Like, you know, you have the graveyard, like the science lab, and there's something that's always cool about like these Universal monster movies. Just all the getting to see like all these like old sets and stuff. It always looks really cool.
Yeah, locations this one are typically really good. I think like, you know, Dracula has good sets to begin with the castle, but once it gets to London and it's just in houses, it's like, okay, now it's just in houses. It's not whatever. This one I think is more consistently interesting between the graveyard, the lab, the tower, the windmill at the
village
end.
And even like the village, it's like kind of like an interesting, like, oh, like, you know, what is this, like it looks kind of like, you know, like a weird like Eastern European like a village or something, like kind of, I don't know, it has like this what am I trying to say, like a kind of like this old-timey quality to it that's kind of cool.
I kind of get what you're saying. It is almost very. It feels like almost could be the village from Resident Evil 4. That you know, they all change into the Ganados. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that being a thing. So yeah, I think it's very concise. I think one of the things that I like about this and a lot of the best Universal monster movies is they kind of feel like almost like the parable versions of the horror genre. Kind of in the way where you bring up Little Red Riding Hood, or you bring up, you know, fairy tales, like grim stuff. They feel very simple, but you feel like a lot of what modern horror has been kind of you know, the grandchildren of, you know, where all this stuff came from. And I watch these now, and it feels like this is very simple. It's very straight and to the point, but it has the ideas there that have evolved over time into other things. But this is completely concentrated in just, no, here it is, beat by beat, the basic story of this. But that's how I feel when I'm watching it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, like I see what you're saying with that makes sense. Like, in a way, these do kind of feel like, yeah, like modern day. I don't know, like I guess maybe if the point of like, you know, fairy tales or stuff or something, where like cautionary tales, like you know, there's definitely a lot of these that you can kind of make like, you know, some similar paths with that. Because like, you know, the big thing is this is like, oh yeah, like you kind of, you know, he's trying to be like God and trying to, you know, create life and stuff when, you know, he shouldn't, and that's kind of, you know, his big downfall.
Yeah, and that's obviously the very grandiose.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah, that's the very grandiose version, but I think even simpler than that, it's just about obsession. It's just, you know, ignoring everything else in his life and just obsessing on this one element. And what that can lead to. So we always say horror is at its best when it has meaning behind it. It's a parable for something else, and this is simpler than maybe some others, but it works. So can't fault that too much. Then some charismatic performances. Arguably a little bit hammy in places. You know, again, everyone remembers it's alive, it's alive, which I've said about 5 times now in this podcast. But you know, that's weird.
Yeah, no, it definitely works. Like, I don't know who plays Henry Frankenstein, but yeah, he does a good job. He's kind of like the, you know, what we think of like mad scientists, nowadays.
Colin Clive, for the record, played.
Oh, okay, there you go. Love his work.
Shit. He was not alive for long after this. He died young. He died age 37 in 1937.
Oh wow.
Yeah. That's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even for that time, that's pretty young.
Yeah. You know, obviously I was expecting him to be dead just because it's such an old movie, but I did not expect it to be. Oh, it was like that decade.
Yeah. Jeez. But he does a good job, and then like the obviously Boris Karloff, you know, kills it as a Frankenstein, which originally didn't they ask what's his face to do it?
Lugosi?
yeah, what and didn't he turn it down because he was like, oh no, like I don't want to, just keep being monsters or whatever, and that's when Boris stepped in.
That sounds familiar. I vaguely remember there being something like that, but I don't know if that was the exact,
Yeah.
Details. But which is funny because they ended up doing like horror movies together. There's quite a few Karloff and Lugosi things. In fact, I'm pretty sure Lugosi ended up playing Frankenstein in one of the sequels eventually, or played the monster in one of the sequels rather.
Yeah, I think he does end up doing it at some point, but no, yeah, Boris Karloff, is great, and then pretty much, everyone's good. The, kind of the secondary characters, like the, whatever like stuffy, stepfathers or in-laws and stuff. They're kind of just whatever, but they're all good. I guess if I have maybe like any complaints, I feel like that kind of stuff is like a little boring for me, but it's not like that egregious that it affects the movie that much. Like because like you said, it's 70 minutes, so everything goes pretty fast. But yeah, that's the one thing I don't enjoy is like the scenes when they're talking about like weddings and that kind of stuff.
No, that's fair. There's not much of it though. I think the ending being a bit too happy and like clean cut, like everything's fine now, is probably my one real problem with it. But I mean, it's not a big problem. It's very minor. Boris Karloff was in House of Frankenstein, but he did not play the monster. He was a doctor in that movie.
Oh, okay.
Because of course he was. I knew there was a thing like that where he came back to a Frankenstein movie, but he wasn't actually Frankenstein or the monster in it. See, even I'm doing it now and calling him Frankenstein.
I think like most of my knowledge like from that just basically comes from the movie Ed Wood, where what is playing Lugosi and talking about it.
Actually, okay, so Lugosi didn't play the monster; he played Igor, but it was Lon Chaney Jr. who was the Wolfman who played the monster in one of the films. So
that's so crazy. Like, imagine if they did like a Nightmare on Elm Street movie where Kane Hodder played Freddy or something.
I know, it's so weird.
It's so weird.
It's so weird. Oh no, I recorrect myself. Lugosi did play the monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So
okay.
That's just so weird how they were just like swapping roles around like between sequels. It was so weird. What would have been really weird though is like if because isn't it kind of disappointing that in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman you've got Lon Chaney Jr. reprising his role as the Wolfman, but the monster from Frankenstein is the guy who played Dracula. Like imagine like Avengers 4, like a few of the actors just went, you know what, let's swap roles.
Yeah.
Just for the fun of it. Like, sure. And I'm sure it wasn't that's not why they did it, but like just it's interesting. No, we will probably do the sequels at some point. I don't want to like dive into them straight away, and I think the reason for that is because they start doing like crossovers and interconnecting eventually, and so
I feel like at the very least we have to do Bride at some point because that's a biggie.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because I've not seen a lot of the sequels for some of them, so I'd be curious to do them at some point.
Definitely.
And make a theme of it of some kind, but certainly for now, I feel like this is fine. Let's do the original, and we'll as much as Bride is a sequel, I kind of just put it in with the other originals because it's like it's big enough and notable enough that it just kind of gets put together with the other biggies. So
it's almost like its own thing. Like it's I would say probably the most notable sequel.
Oh, by far, not even close. Out of all those movies, not even close. I guess we rate it. Do we rate Frankenstein? What are you giving Frankenstein?
I think I'll give it. Again, I like it a lot. It's not my favorite Universal monster movie, but it is still, really good. So I'm gonna give it a 8.5. Still fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm gonna go just one little trinket higher, and I'm gonna go with a 9 out of 10. I think it is very much one of the granddaddies of horror movies. I think it holds up very well and is still very, very fun to watch. The performances really give it a lot of charisma, and the monster, the set pieces, everything we talked about is really good. And while it doesn't necessarily completely get the themes and the purpose of the plot from the book and other adaptations, it has enough so that it's got its own thing going for it in terms of the themes of tragedy and the themes of monster and neglect and obsession and all those things. So I think it's got a lot going for it that it still holds up pretty well. All this time later, what are we at now? 80 something years, almost 80 years.
Almost, yeah, or yeah, it must be about that.
Yeah, well, more than that because I'm 31, so 70, 90.
So probably a little. Yeah,
it'll be 90 years in 2021.
A couple of years.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we're at 87 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Math is not our strong suit, people. It's not. Don't be fooled. So no, Frankenstein. So yeah, it was nice to end on a classic for the month. For this Octoberthon, it's been a fun Octoberthon. With lots of notable movies. Got through all the Reanimators, which obviously is kind of related to Frankenstein, actually, in a weird way.
Okay, yeah.
And we finished off the Halloween franchise with a new release, of course, as well as the remakes. And we started the Hellraiser franchise. So we got a lot of big things going. And of course, most importantly, though, we did the Pet and Chopping Mall, two of the biggest and most important movies we've ever done on Streams After Midnight. So by all means, let us know what you think of Frankenstein. Let us know what you thought of Octoberthon overall in the comments. Of course, as we said, actually, I don't know if we said it in this video, we might have said it in the last one, but there'll be no movie next week, but there will be a top 50 countdown instead, which was originally going to be part of October, but we couldn't quite squeeze it in. But we're going to do the top 50 horror films of the 1980s. Me and Tim are going to have both have our own lists. We're going to count them down, and that should be good fun. So you can look out for that. And then the week after that, we'll be back to our regular movie per week with the occasional bonus here or there when time permits. So that's the plan. So if you want to support the channel and the show and everything we do here, head over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and you can do that over there. You get some bonuses and some other stuff. Otherwise, let us know what you thought of the movie. Get us on Twitter at Screams Midnight and get me on Twitter at Weeble89, Tim on Twitter at Tim Vergulish. But otherwise, that is us. So happy Halloween once again, because this went up in Halloween. You may be watching this much later, but this went out in Halloween 2018. So that's what you're getting happy Halloween from us. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we'll see you next time.